Ford's Coyote V8 is definitely one of their all-time best engines, but there are a few things that everyone's going to need to address. The number one being coolant leaks. If you own one of these trucks, as from when the 5.0s came out to where they are today, you're going to have to do the water pump and a few other things. Whenever you replace the water pump, which is the main item that usually leaks, a lot of times you'll induce or find leaks as you go with the coolant fittings. So I'm going to show you guys all the parts that you need to do when you're going to replace one of these water pumps and the tools to do it. We're going to make this video sort of quick because I know there's a few other ones that have been done that are just super long and drawn out, like over an hour. And this is a pretty easy job. So we'll go ahead and jump in, and I'm going to show you guys from the very beginning and not leave anything out as far as what you have to remove and replace to fix your coolant leaks. The parts in front of you are the absolute bare minimum that you need to buy to do your water pump job. The main one obviously is the water pump. The second most important is going to be this Y or T fitting right here. And then you're going to want to get the gasket that goes from the thermostat housing to the water outlet right here on the water pump. This gasket is going to come with your water pump. Now, you don't have to buy a metal one, but I highly, highly recommend buying the Dorman upgrade part that's made of metal because these fittings leak pretty much anytime you look at them. I'll have part numbers for the ones that I recommend right here. I like this one a lot because it has a metal impeller instead of the plastic one. I don't know that it makes that big of a difference, but it's not any more expensive, so you might as well pick it up. The very first thing you're going to want to do is drain your coolant, and so it's going to get a little shaky here, but I want to show you exactly where you're going to be to find the coolant drain, because it isn't in a very intuitive location. So right here we have this cross member. Our coolant drain is going to be towards the front of the truck, right inside this little pocket on the outside. So you see that red thing? That is the coolant drain. Just use a flathead screwdriver and loosen it up. It will not come out all the way unless you pull really hard on it, but you can let the coolant drain out slowly. So let me zoom out here for reference. This should get you where you want to go. This is the driver's side of the truck. The very first thing we're going to have to do is remove the intake, and I'm going to remove the coolant reservoir just to make videoing a little bit easier. You don't have to do this if you're doing it yourself. This is going to be a 7 mil on both of these band clamps. They're pretty self-explanatory once you look down inside there. This hose right here will just pop right out. We can actually go ahead and take this clamp off since I'm removing the reservoir. You're going to squeeze underneath, and you should be able to lock it into its little hole. If not, you can just pull it off like that. So we'll set that out of the way. Then back here, we have our PCV and our evap purge. For the evap purge, you're going to push down on the black plastic tab and just pull back. Be careful because the barb that comes off the intake is prone to snapping in my experience. Then next up we have the PCV. There's going to be a gray tab that you're just going to kind of push out of the way and it'll come off. Now we got the intake removed. There's the PCV, there's the evap purge. Here you can see that plastic tab that I was telling you about on that section there. All right, let's go ahead and zip off this reservoir. So see that clamp stayed clamped like it's supposed to. I'm going to replace a few more parts that you may or may not replace just because while I'm in here, I want to make sure we don't have leaks in the future. One of the main components is this one right here. It's actually this collection of heater hoses, and they have two plastic T's over there that break pretty often. So I'm going to replace that as an assembly, and I'll show you that part number. And then we have one metal heater pipe that comes off of the water pump that I'm also going to replace. We've got the two upper hoses, the small ones, removed from the reservoir. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the lower one right here. You could take this connection off, but I really like to avoid moving and messing with these plastic ones that have the O-ring inside. All right, that one's not going to lock in, so we'll just move it out of the way. Then we'll take our channel locks to loosen up this hose. All right, there we go. Now we can go about removing the reservoir. The reservoir is going to be two 10mm nuts. There we go, and there is that pipe that we just took off. So this is a thing that we don't want to mess with if we can help it. Now that the reservoir is out of the way, you guys can see a lot better what's going on. So you may or may not want to remove it for yourself. We're going to go ahead and break these loose right here. These are going to be 8mm or 5/16. Once I have them broken loose, then we'll zip them out with the 1/4" impact. It's up to you if you want to replace the gasket behind here. You don't necessarily have to. And I'm not going to mess with the electrical connector either. We're just going to move it out of the way and set it aside. So this is the O-ring behind the throttle body. It's up to you if you want to replace it. It is very cheap and it doesn't hurt to go ahead and swap it out. Everything that's in here that I say maybe we should replace, there's going to be links to the part numbers. What you want to do right here for sure though is stuff this hole with some rags. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is get your pick up underneath the raised section of this metal clip here. And we're talking about this metal clip here and this metal clip here. One is part of the upper radiator hose and the other one is going to be part of the thing that we're actually replacing. So I'll start with this one down here first. All right, so right inside here, this is a part, this one specifically, you could use a small flathead if you don't want to get a pick. There's a groove on the top and bottom where this is going to click into, so it shouldn't go flying. This one is underneath, a little stuck, so I'm going to help it out. There we go. Okay, upper radiator hose. We'll go ahead and aim that towards the ground, drain out some more crud, then we can tuck it out of the way behind one of the AC lines. Now there is a seal in that hose that you want to make sure you don't lose. You can replace it, but I don't often replace those. You're going to push down and pinch in on both of these white tabs. This is one of the heater hoses that we're replacing. You don't have to do that one, but I recommend you do it. It'll be later on in the video. See if we can pull this off. We may have to go ahead and pull the thermostat housing. Let's see if it comes off. There we go. Okay. So let's see. This is the part that was leaking right here, but we're going to replace the whole thing. It's up to you if you want to go ahead and put a warm gear clamp on here, or if you want to reuse the spring clamp. I don't like dealing with those, so I'm going to put a warm gear clamp on it. Thermostat housing is going to be 8mm or 5/16. It's a good idea to assemble everything with some anti-seize when you put this kind of stuff back together, just because it's all aluminum. You can already see some corrosion building up on that top outlet that you saw a second ago. We're not going to remove this from the lower radiator hose. We're just going to move it aside. If your truck has really high miles, like 200,000 or more, I would recommend going ahead and replacing the thermostat while you're in here. My truck has pretty low miles, so we're not going to do that. We're just going to replace the seal. All right, now we have this off and we can set it aside. Let me go ahead and get the pick and I'll pull the seal out of it so you can see what it looks like. When you're looking for seals for your thermostat, there's going to be two that are going to come up, one for the thermostat itself and one for the housing. And the way you can tell them apart is the housing seal has all these ridges on it. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's got a bunch of ridges, so that's the correct one to replace if you're not doing the thermostat itself. All right, thermostat housing is now pushed aside. Hopefully you didn't get ahead of yourself and pull the belts off, because you want to leave the belts on so you can remove the bolts for the water pump. If you're using an impact, it's not that big of a deal, but if you're not using power tools, you're gonna have to put the belt back on most likely. Nothing special or difficult with removing these bolts. They're gonna be 10mm. I'm gonna use the impact. Okay, those are out. If you want to leave one in, you can, just so the pulley doesn't pop off, but they don't usually. Next up, we can go ahead and remove the belt, and for that, we're going to need a 15 mil on either, you can use a wrench, or you can use a ratchet and a socket. Down here is our 15 mil. Now, this is another one of those things that would be good to replace at the time. Be good to go ahead and replace your tensioner and your belt, especially if you do have a coolant leak. So I am going to replace these. I'm going to replace them at a later date because they weren't in stock and I had to order them. But for now, we're just going to put them back on and I'll swap them out a different day. All right, now we are down to the nitty gritty, the reason we came here, which is the water pump itself. So if you are not replacing this pipe, you're going to have to remove it. Again, it's an 8 or a 5/16. A lot of times these get really rusty, so it's a good idea to swap them out. Here, I'm going to show you guys how to remove it, even though I'm replacing mine completely. Just going to give it a wiggle back and forth. You may have to stick a flathead screwdriver down inside there to give yourself some more leverage to push up, especially if yours is really corroded. Another reason why it's best just to replace it with the water pump. So that's what it looks like inside there. There's that orange seal that you'll want to replace if you're not swapping the pipe out. Okay, on to the water pump itself. These are all going to be 10 millimeters. All right, let's see if this thing is stuck in there or if it wants to come out. You don't want to beat on it really hard in any one direction because it actually needs to come out kind of straight. And if you keep beating on it in one spot, you'll damage the inside. There we go. Here's the old water pump and a whole lot more coolant that didn't come out earlier. Okay, I know the lighting isn't great, but you can see our new water pump. I've already installed the O-ring, got some lithium grease on it, but the impeller is perfectly parallel with the face of the water pump here. Well, our old water pump, the plastic impeller is quite a bit sideways from where it's supposed to be, and that plastic is digging in to the back side of the pump. Also, the input you can see here way off to the side. So when these things fail, they fail pretty big. All right, make sure inside here is very clean. Coolant is fine, but you don't want any corrosion. So luckily this truck was pretty well taken care of. Don't really have any issues, but if you have corrosion buildup in there, kind of like you have right there, you'll definitely want to take some Scotch-Brite and clean that thing up inside. Don't go too crazy with it though, because it is aluminum. Okay, now we'll go ahead and get our new water pump in place. Remember to put some grease on the O-ring. And you want to be careful with this part because you can kind of put it in sideways and you don't want to do that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put in 2 of the bolts just for alignment purposes. If you want to go ahead and put in all 4, you can. Just remember you're going to want to put anti-seize on these bolts. Once you've got anti-seize on all your bolts and you have them all started, you can go around and evenly tighten them. So just do a little bit at a time and watch your gaps. Okay, so we have that thing nice and straight. Now what I have to do is torque it down, and I'm going to put the torque measurements down in the description. I can't remember off the top of my head, so I'm going to have to go look at that and then I'll tighten these up. All right, so next up, we're going to go ahead and replace the new Y. you're going to want to get a little bit of coolant so you can lubricate the O-rings. So just dip your finger in the closest coolant jug, lubricate the O-ring on that side first, and we're going to install the thermostat housing onto this piece. So push it on there until it clicks. So once you have the new Y onto the thermostat housing, we're going to set this to the side for just a minute because we need to install our new metal pipe right here, and I'm not going to have that until tomorrow with all of the heater lines. So for right now, I'm going to stop. You guys won't know any difference because the power of video. All right, well, it is now tomorrow, so thank you for being so patient and waiting for these parts to come in. We're going to go ahead and get on with the rest of the job. First up is going to be installing our outlet pipe for the top of the water pump here, and you do need to do this before you install your thermostat housing. So in the description down below, there will be torque numbers for this bolt right here, as well as the water pump bolts. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's 10 Newton meters. They're O-ring seals, so torque isn't super critical on these like it is when you have some type of compression gaskets. All right, now we can put our thermostat housing back on. Make sure you put in your new O-ring before you do this. There's a couple different ways you can do it. You can remove this bottom hose, and I think that is a little bit easier, honestly, but I really kind of want to disturb the least amount of junctions on here, so I'm just going to leave it like it is, and it should be just fine. All right, so now we just have to replace this assembly of heater hoses. The two on the left-hand side closest to the new metal fittings go to your heater core. They come off with the quick connects where you pinch either side and just push and pull, kind of like these top ones. And then we have some spring clamps down at the bottom. We have two that go to a coolant bypass switch, and then the ends go down to the cooler underneath the truck. I'm not going to video this part. It's very self-explanatory. Once you see it, you'll know exactly what to do, and I want to kind of keep this video short. So all we've got to do left, once we hook those up, is reinstall the throttle body, new gasket if you can get one, and then stick our degas bottle on here. Once the degas bottle is on, we'll just fill it up with coolant. There's not a special bleeding procedure for this vehicle like there are for some, but one thing that does help out is if you can drive your truck up on some ramps or have it on an incline. That way those air bubbles can move up towards the degas bottle just a little bit easier, especially since we're removing the heater core line. Sometimes bubbles can get stuck in the heater core if your truck is on a decline. But normal driving really gets all the air out of these things. They're not like some Fords where you have to do a special vacuum fill procedure. Just don't forget to screw in your radiator drain plug. All right, well, I got these hoses replaced. They are a little bit of a pain in the lower section since they're all hose clamps instead of these quick connects. But just take your time if you're doing those. Shouldn't have an issue. Next up, all we've got to do is put back our degas bottle and our intake tube, and then we can fire this thing up. I wanted to make one final note. For the bleeding of this system, all you've got to do is run the engine. But to make it faster, what you can do is pull it up on some ramps and turn the AC on, full blast on cold to warm the engine up. And then once it's up to temperature, switch it over to full blast on heater and make sure the AC compressor is off at that point. And then you're going to hold the throttle at 3,000 to 3,500 RPMs for 10 seconds. And while you're doing that, you should be able to see through that windshield. A bunch of bubbles are going to start coming up in your degas bottle. So you'll do that, and then you'll let off for around a minute, and then you'll hold back on 3,000 RPMs for another 10 seconds, and keep doing that until you don't see bubbles anymore. That's pretty much it. And you should use 1 3/4 gallon of coolant if you did everything that I showed you here in this video. Thanks for watching.